So, Congressman, we've seen some shifting rhetoric from the administration on immigration enforcement, for example, pulling back on some workplace raids and then reversing that guidance days later. Does that reflect shifting political realities and unclear strategy? What do you think is going on?
Chris, the president and his team know that while the country is still behind them, at least if you look at the polling on immigration, that there is some risk here. There is a breaking point. That's why you saw the president pull back and say, we're not going to go out to farms and to the agricultural community or to hotels and start doing raids there. He understands that, like during his first term, when they went too far with the child separation policy, there is a risk here. They could lose the public support. And by the way, this is the one issue, according to recent polling, where the president is above water. So they wouldn't want to do that. They wouldn't want to be underwater on every issue. So yes, this is the strongest issue for the Trump administration. They want it to be covered every day in the news, but they understand that there's still some risk and they can't go too far and start enforcing immigration laws at social events, at baseball games. That would really turn the public strongly against this administration.
I mean, that begs the question, Lisa. So what happens if the facts on the ground or the facts as they are seen by one side or the other change?
Well, let me read to you, Chris, if I can, from last night's decision, because the panel addresses that. They say, we emphasize that our decision addresses only the facts before us, and we hold that the president likely has authority to federalize the Guard. Nothing in our decision addresses the nature of the activities in which the federalized National Guard may engage. Plaintiffs had argued that certain uses of the National Guard would violate something called the Posse Comitatus Act, which generally prohibits the military from assisting in or participating in domestic law enforcement. And last night's court says the district court found that claim to be premature. We express no opinion on it. So if that changes and we see that on the ground the National Guard is crossing the line between protecting federal personnel, protecting federal property, and starting to actually participate in what a court would consider domestic law enforcement, this could be a very different calculus for the judge today, but also for future appeals courts.
So talk about the hearing next hour.
Yep, the hearing next hour is a preliminary injunction hearing. Judge Breyer last week issued something called a temporary restraining order that was designed to prohibit the Trump administration from having the Guard on the ground. But those temporary restraining orders are supposed to last for about 14 days, unless extended. The court last night said, we're going to issue a stay of that. A preliminary injunction is basically a longer-lasting temporary restraining order. It may be that Judge Breyer will grant that as well, knowing full well that an appeals court will pause that as well, but wanting to give California that relief when and if the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals changes its mind when it hears this case on the merits or the Supreme Court gets involved. And of course, as we just discussed, the facts on the ground could change. You have a declaration from the LAPD to the judge deciding today, basically saying what they're doing on the ground, meaning the National Guard, isn't what we consider law enforcement. And I'm just going to read from it: detaining civilians, blocking access to public locations, directing traffic, and utilizing force against protesters. Those are all within the scope of core law enforcement functions. That's what we do. That's not what they're supposed to do. And if they're doing it, that's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, federal law.
So, Congressman, I mean, when you mentioned the public, and I was thinking about the Fox News poll just yesterday, I think it's 53% are against the immigration policies. You watch the pendulum swing, and does it swing person by person, county by county, in this sense, when you hear a woman saying, look, you have entire economies in Los Angeles that are based on the immigrant workforce. They are the people who are, taking your tickets. They're the people who are buying the tickets. They're the people who are working behind the food stands and cleaning up the stadium after. I mean, it seems like more and more and more it's affecting individuals, someone they know or someone they know knows someone who is directly being affected by this or is afraid because of this. What do you see as a potential turning point here, or is there one? Is Donald Trump just dug in?
Well, look, Chris, I think all of these instances, when these stories are humanized, if the American people see that someone who's simply contributing to this country, even if they did come illegally, right? Someone who's
The
cleaning
soccer
hotel
mom,
rooms,
right?
working at a farm. I mean, if these people are being deported, I think those instances where these stories are humanized and they aren't just numbers, that does erode the public support for some of these aggressive immigration policies. The other big factor is also what you mentioned. Someone may lose a caretaker, someone who's taking care of their children, maybe someone who's taking care of their elderly parents. This has already happened in my South Florida community. So that also begins to erode public support. This perception of the government being too heavy-handed, being fundamentally unfair. Once the stories become humanized, I think that's when the administration starts getting in trouble. When it's all about the numbers, a strong majority of the American people believe we should enforce our immigration laws, and they believe we shouldn't have people in the country illegally. So in theory, strong support for this kind of policy. Once you get down to the details, it starts getting a lot more mixed, and that's where the president can lose support. And the people who are most paying attention to this, Chris, are congressional Republicans who have to face voters, especially in swing districts, in the 2026 elections.